He threw her out at 11 o'clock at night. 6 months pregnant, in February. She was sitting on the front step with nothing but a hospital bag and her dignity when the most dangerous man in the city drove past and made a decision that changed both their lives. If you've ever been discarded by someone who was supposed to protect you, stay until the end. This one's for you. Before we go anywhere, if you're new here, hit subscribe, because we tell stories like this every single week and you do not want to miss what's coming next month. Now, let's get into it. Naomi Carter had spent 3 years making herself smaller for a man who kept needing more space. She had learned to read the temperature of a room the moment she walked into it. The specific tension in Marcus Webb's shoulders that meant the evening was going to be difficult. The particular silence that preceded something she would have to absorb and then quietly put back together afterward. She had become, over 3 years of marriage, to a man who had never once hit her, but had found 1,000 other ways to make her understand that her presence was conditional, an expert in the architecture of walking on eggshells without making a sound. She had thought the baby would change something, not fix everything. She was not, even at her most hopeful, the kind of woman who believed a child was a solution to a marriage, but soften something, create a new center of gravity that might pull Marcus toward the better version of himself she had spent 3 years believing was in there somewhere. The baby had not changed anything. It had, in fact, clarified things considerably. "I can't do this," Marcus said, standing in the kitchen of the house they'd bought together 18 months ago, on an evening that had started as an argument about dinner and had become, in the way their arguments always eventually became, about everything else. "I look at you and I don't feel what I'm supposed to feel. I haven't for a long time. I need you to leave." Naomi stood in the kitchen with one hand resting on her stomach. 6 months along, the baby moving with the unbothered regularity of someone entirely unaware of what was happening above her, and looked at her husband with the particular exhaustion of a woman who had seen this coming for long enough that the arrival of it was almost a relief. "It's 11 o'clock, she said. "It's February." "I know what time it is." "I'm 6 months pregnant, Marcus." "I know that, too." He didn't look away, which she had once thought meant he was being honest with her, and now understood meant he simply didn't feel guilty enough to look away. "I'll send your things. I just need you to go tonight." She took the hospital bag she'd already packed, not because she'd known this was coming tonight specifically, but because she was the kind of woman who prepared for things, who kept a bag packed the way some people kept emergency cash, because hope was not a strategy and she had run out of strategies for this marriage weeks ago. She took her coat, she took her phone, she walked out the front door and sat down on the front step because her car was in Marcus's name, and she had understood in the moment he said the words that asking to take it would start a different and longer argument than the one she was capable of having at 11 o'clock at night in February while 6 months pregnant. She sat on the step and it started to rain. If you're already feeling this one, drop a comment. I want to know where you're watching from tonight. Now, back to the story. The car that slowed down was black, expensive, and should not have been on this particular residential street at this particular hour. The man driving it was not lost. He was never lost. He had an internal map of the city that extended to the last block and the last building on it. But he had taken a longer route back from a meeting that had run late, specifically because he preferred to drive when he needed to think, and thinking required roads that weren't the same ones he always took. Seo Hyun-jae had been running his organization for 11 years, which meant he had been making decisions about danger for 11 years, what constituted it, how to approach it, how to remove it, and he had developed in that time a particular sensitivity to situations that required intervention. It was not sentimentality. He would have said it himself. He was not a sentimental man. He was a man with a finely calibrated sense for when something was wrong and an ingrained inability to drive past it. A woman, visibly pregnant, sitting on a front step in February, rain at 11:15 at night, with a single hospital bag at her feet and the specific stillness of someone who had nowhere to go and had not yet decided what to do about that, was something that was wrong. He pulled over. He did not get out immediately. He sat in the car for a moment, engine running, watching through the rain-streaked window with the assessment of a man who needed to understand a situation before he entered it. She hadn't looked up. She was looking at the rain falling in the streetlight, with the particular expression of someone who had already had the crying part somewhere private and was now past it, sitting in the wreckage of a decision someone else had made with the flat, exhausted practicality of someone who had survived hard things before and was already quietly calculating how to survive this one. He got out of the car. She looked up when she heard the door, and her expression went through the particular sequence of a woman alone at night, registering a strange man approaching, Alertness, assessment, the rapid calculation of threat, before settling into something that wasn't quite relief but was adjacent to it. The specific recalibration of someone who has just assessed that the danger in front of them is not the same category as the danger behind them. "Are you all right?" he asked, which was, he was aware, an objectively strange question given the visual evidence available. "I've been better," she said. Her voice was steady, which told him more about her than the hospital bag or the rain. "Is there someone you can call?" She looked at her phone, then back at him. "My mother is in Atlanta. My best friend is in the middle of a night shift. My sister—" She stopped. "My sister would come, but she has 3 kids, and it's almost midnight, and I don't want to—" She stopped again, pressed her lips together in the particular way of someone declining to finish a sentence because finishing it would require admitting more than they were prepared to admit to a stranger. "I'll figure it out." Hyun-jae stood in the rain and looked at this woman, who was 6 months pregnant and sitting on a step in February, and had apparently just decided she was going to figure it out through sheer force of the specific stubbornness that kept her voice steady while everything else was clearly not, and made a decision he was not going to examine too closely in the moment. "Come with me," he said. "I have a guest room. You can make whatever calls you need to make from somewhere warm and dry." She looked at him with the flat, pragmatic assessment of a woman who had learned not to take things at face value. "I don't know you." "No," he agreed. "My name is Seo Hyun-jae. I live 4 blocks from here. I'm not going to do anything to harm you or your child, and I recognize that's exactly what someone who intended harm would also say, so I'll add that my housekeeper is home. There are 2 other people in the building, and you're welcome to stay on this step and call me if you change your mind." He produced a card, plain, matte, a phone number, and set it on the step beside her hospital bag. Then he turned back toward his car. "Wait," she said. He waited. She looked at the card. Then she looked at him with the specific expression of a woman making a calculated risk in a situation where all the available options involve some level of risk, and choosing the one that at least came with a roof. "Naomi," she said Naomi Carter. "I know," he said, which made her blink until he added, "It was on the mailbox." She almost laughed. It wasn't quite a laugh. Too much had happened in the last hour for it to fully arrive. But it was close enough that some of the terrible stillness around her edges eased slightly, and she picked up her hospital bag and stood up, and Seo Hyun-jae held his car door open in the February rain and did not say anything else because he had learned a long time ago that some moments didn't need words to be understood. The house was not what she expected, which was a thought she recognized as slightly absurd, given that she had no idea what to expect from the home of a man she'd met on a sidewalk 3 minutes ago. It was large, considerably larger than anything in the neighborhood she'd just left, but not ostentatiously so, the kind of space that announced money through quality rather than excess. The housekeeper, a small Korean woman named Mrs. O, who seemed entirely unsurprised by the arrival of a pregnant stranger at midnight, produced tea and a heated blanket and directed Naomi to a guest room with the efficient warmth of someone who had seen odder things and managed them with equal competence. Naomi sat on the edge of the guest bed, heated blanket around her shoulders, and sent her mother a text that said, "I'm okay, I'll call you in the morning," and then sat with her phone in her lap and her hand on her stomach and tried to organize the next 12 hours into something that resembled a plan. The baby moved. A small, insistent flutter. The baby's particular way of reminding her, at intervals, that there was a person inside the situation who had no vote on any of it and was counting on Naomi to figure it out regardless. "I know," Naomi said quietly to her stomach. "I know. We're going to figure it out." A knock at the door, light, asking rather than assuming. "Come in," she said. Hyun-jae stood in the doorway with the particular carefulness of a man who had just installed a stranger in his house and was still calibrating what that meant. "Mrs. O says you haven't eaten." "I'm not really hungry." "She also says that's not an acceptable answer for someone 6 months pregnant, and she outranks me on most things domestic, so I'm afraid I'm required to relay the message." Naomi looked at him, at the slight, dry precision with which he delivered that sentence, at the complete absence of anything that felt like performance or agenda, and felt something that had been locked very tightly in her chest since 11 o'clock begin, marginally to loosen. "Tell Mrs. O I'll eat something," she said, "and thank you for stopping. You didn't have to." "No," Hyun-jae agreed, "I didn't." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. He simply nodded once, the nod of a man who had made a decision and was not in the habit of requiring credit for it, and pulled the door gently closed. Naomi sat in the quiet of the guest room, in a house that belonged to a stranger whose name she'd learned 20 minutes ago, and understood that she had no idea what came next. For herself, for the baby, for the marriage she was presumably no longer in, and found, to her own quiet surprise, that the not knowing felt considerably less terrifying than the 11 months of knowing exactly what was coming and being unable to stop it. Whatever this was, it was at least something new. She stayed 3 days, which became a week, which became something neither of them had named yet, but that had quietly reorganized the rhythms of the house around itself. The guest room became, by the 4th day, less guest room and more the room where Naomi worked from her laptop in the mornings on the remote project management job that was, currently, the only income stream she had that didn't run through Marcus, and where Mrs. O appeared at 11 o'clock each morning, without being asked, with something warm and the particular expression of a woman who had decided, unilaterally, that Naomi's nutrition was now her personal project. Hyun-jae was present in the way that large, quiet things are present. She felt the fact of him in the house without his being constantly visible, the way you feel weather through a window. He left early most mornings before she came down for breakfast and returned in the evenings at irregular hours, and when they were in the same space, it was with the specific, careful courtesy of two people giving each other room to exist without obligation. He did not ask her questions about Marcus. She did not volunteer information. This was, she understood, a deliberate and mutual agreement that neither of them had stated aloud, and she was grateful for it in the way you're grateful for things that cost the other person something. What he did ask about was the baby. Not in the way some people asked, with the performative enthusiasm that was really about making themselves comfortable with a situation they found awkward, but with the specific, direct curiosity of someone who found the subject genuinely interesting and was not in the habit of pretending to feel things he didn't. "What's her name?" he asked on the 5th evening, in the kitchen where they had developed a habit of ending up at the same time without planning it, him making tea, her eating whatever Mrs. O had left covered on the stove. "I haven't decided yet." She paused. "I was waiting to decide with—" She stopped. "I was going to decide with someone. I'm deciding alone now, so I'm taking my time." He nodded, the nod that she had come to recognize as his way of acknowledging something without pressing on it. "What are the options?" "Imani, or Zora, or possibly something my mother would hate just to see her face." "What would your mother hate?" "She has a complicated relationship with names that she considers trying too hard. She named me Naomi because it was, quote, dignified without being showy." She looked down at her stomach. This baby has been dignified and unshowy for 6 months by no choice of her own. I think she's earned something with a little more personality. Something that was not quite a smile but was clearly related to one moved across Hyun-jae's face. "Zora," he said. "That's the one." She looked at him with mild surprise. "You have a strong opinion about a baby name you've known about for 30 seconds? "It's a strong name," he said simply. "It sounds like someone who would be hard to ignore." Naomi looked at her stomach and thought about that for a moment. Then she said, "Yeah, that's what I thought too." If this story is hitting you somewhere real, drop a like and subscribe. It costs you nothing and it means everything to this channel. Now, back to the story. Marcus called on the 8th day. She had been expecting it, not the call specifically, but the shape of it, the particular way he would eventually decide that the thing he'd thrown away was worth retrieving, not because he wanted it back, but because he didn't want anyone else to have it either. "I want to talk," he said. "We're talking now. In person. Come home." "That's not my home anymore, Marcus. You were very clear about that 8 days ago." A pause, the pause of a man recalibrating from the version of this conversation he'd prepared for. "Where are you staying?" "Somewhere safe." "Naomi, I need you to call my lawyer," she said. "I've retained one. Anything you need to say to me, say it through her." She had retained the lawyer on day 3, using the emergency fund she'd been quietly building for 8 months in an account Marcus didn't know about. Proof, she sometimes thought, that some part of her had known the destination of this marriage long before she'd been willing to admit it consciously. She hung up. Her hands were steady. She noted this with the same pragmatic satisfaction she'd noted other small victories of the last 8 days. That she was eating properly, that she had slept better in this guest room than she had in her own bed in months, that the baby had been moving with the energetic regularity of someone entirely unbothered by the upheaval around her. Hyun-jae was in the doorway of the sitting room when she came downstairs, his expression carrying the particular quality of someone who has heard something through a house and is deciding whether to acknowledge it. "He called," she said before he could ask. "I gathered. I told him to go through my lawyer. She sat in the armchair by the window, the chair that had become, in 8 days, somehow hers, in the way that chairs in other people's houses become yours when you sit in them long enough. He'll send someone next. That's how he operates. He'll start with someone who seems reasonable and then escalate. Hyun-jae considered this with the flat, analytical attention he brought to most things. What does he want? He doesn't want me back, she said. He wants to control the terms of me being gone. The house, the assets, whatever he thinks he can claim before I can document it properly. She paused. And the baby. Not because he wants to be her father. I don't think he knows how to want things like that. But because having custody is leverage, and leverage is the only language he's ever fully understood. She said it all steadily, without drama, the specific tone of a woman who had spent 8 days processing something that would have broken an earlier version of her and had come out the other side with a clear-eyed map of exactly what she was facing. Hyun-jae was quiet for a moment. Your lawyer? Is she good? She's very good. She's also expensive, and I have about 4 more months of emergency fund before that becomes a problem. It won't become a problem, he said. She looked at him with the particular expression she'd developed for the moments when he said things like this, direct, definitive things that weren't offers so much as statements of fact about a future he'd apparently already decided. Hyun-jae, you're in my house, he said simply. That means what happens to you while you're here is my concern. I'm not offering charity. I'm telling you that you have time, and I'll make sure you have time. Why? She asked it genuinely, the same question she'd been not asking for 8 days. Why did you stop? Why did you let me stay? You don't know me. He was quiet for a moment that felt, to her, like the pause before something honest. I know what it looks like when someone has been managing a situation alone for too long, he said finally. I recognize it. And I know that the specific kind of pride that makes someone sit in the rain rather than ask for help is not the kind of pride that should be punished. He met her eyes with the directness she'd come to expect from him. You reminded me of someone I couldn't help when I should have been able to. That's not your problem to carry. But it's an honest answer. Naomi held that answer for a long moment, turning it over, understanding that it was more than he usually gave and that it had cost him something to give it. Thank you, she said, for the honest answer. Don't thank me yet, he said. Your husband is going to send someone. When he does, let me know before your lawyer does. She looked at him with a slight narrowing of her eyes. Not suspicion exactly, but the specific assessment of someone recalibrating what they understand about the person in front of them. What are you going to do? Talk to them, he said. Just talk. She had the strong suspicion that just talk meant something considerably more complex in his context than in most people's. She also had, for the first time in 8 days, the equally strong suspicion that Marcus Webb had significantly underestimated the situation he'd created when he'd put his pregnant wife on a front step in February rain. Marcus sent his brother Derek on the 11th day. Derek Webb was the kind of man who had learned charm as a professional tool and deployed it with the efficiency of someone who had never had to develop anything else. Smooth-voiced, well-dressed, arriving at a house he didn't know the address of through means Naomi found alarming, until she remembered that Marcus had always known more about her location at any given time than she'd been entirely comfortable with. Derek sat across from her in the sitting room. Hyun-jae was present, introduced simply as a friend, seated in the chair nearest the door with the particular stillness of someone who was listening to everything and had opinions about all of it, and laid out in the friendly, reasonable tones of a man who believed friendly reasonableness was its own form of pressure, what Marcus was proposing. He's willing to be generous, Derek said. The house goes to him, his parents helped with the down payment, that's just a practical reality. The car, the joint accounts go 50-50. A pause, timed for effect. For the baby, he's thinking primary physical custody with you. Reasonable visitation for him. Standard arrangement. Everyone stays civil. Naomi looked at him with the expression she'd been practicing for exactly this kind of conversation. Calm, attentive, giving nothing away. His parents contributed $15,000 toward a $400,000 house, she said. His definition of helped with the down payment is creative. Derek's smile didn't waver. Naomi, we're trying to make this easy. You're trying to make this fast, she said. Those are different things. Tell Marcus my lawyer will be in touch. Derek's smile stayed, but something behind it adjusted. He looked for the first time at Hyun-jae, really looked. the assessing look of a man trying to determine what exactly he was dealing with. Hyun-jae met the look with nothing at all. Not a threat, not a performance. Simply the complete absence of any indication that Derek Webb's assessment of him was something he found relevant. Derek left shortly after. In the hallway, gathering his coat, he said to Naomi quietly enough that it was designed to feel private. "Marcus knows people, Naomi. This doesn't have to get complicated." "It got complicated," Naomi said, "the night he put me outside in February. Everything after that is just consequence." She closed the door. She stood in the hallway for a moment with her hand on the door and her forehead slightly bowed, not in defeat, but in the specific gathering of someone who has just fired a shot and is now waiting to see what fires back. Behind her, Hyun-jae said, "You handled that well." "I've been handling things for 3 years," she said without turning around. "I'm very good at it by now." A pause. "You shouldn't have to be," he said quietly. She turned around then and looked at him. Really looked, the way she hadn't quite let herself look in 11 days of careful proximity, and understood that whatever slow burn had been building in the space between them since a rainy night on a front step was no longer something she could pretend she wasn't feeling. She didn't say anything about it, neither did he. But the distance between them, which had been careful and deliberate and mutually maintained, had shifted by some small and unmistakable amount, and both of them knew it, and neither of them moved to undo it. Marcus escalated as she had known he would on the 14th day. Not through Derek this time. Derek had apparently reported back that the situation was more complicated than anticipated, which had produced in Marcus the specific, predictable reaction of a man who responded to the unexpected by reaching for larger tools than the situation actually warranted. The larger tool, in this case, was a lawyer named Prescott, who arrived at Hyun-jae's building with a process server and a motion for an emergency custody evaluation. A document that argued in language Naomi's own lawyer described as creative and aggressively optimistic, that Naomi's current living situation constituted an unstable environment for an unborn child, citing her residence at an address associated with known criminal enterprise. Naomi read the motion at the kitchen table at 7 in the morning with her coffee, and the particular flat calm of a woman who has been expecting something and is now observing its arrival with the detachment of someone who is already prepared for it. Then she called her lawyer, and then she walked into the sitting room where Hyun-jae was reading something at his desk, and she set the motion down in front of him without saying anything, and she watched him read it with the specific attention of a man going through a document and understanding very precisely what it was designed to do. "He's claiming my house is an unstable environment for your baby," he said. "Yes." "Based on my professional associations." "Yes." He set the document down. He was quiet for a moment, not the calculated quiet of someone deciding what to say, but the particular stillness of a man who had just been given a problem with a very clear shape and was already working out the cleanest solution to it. "This is designed to force you back into his sphere," he said. "If the custody evaluation goes forward while you're living here, anything they find about this address becomes part of a court record attached to your child's case. He's not trying to win the custody argument. He's trying to make continuing to stay here cost you something you can't afford." "I know," Naomi said. "I need to find somewhere else to go." "You're not going anywhere," he said. She looked at him with the expression she'd developed for his definitive statements, the one that was part gratitude and part the specific frustration of an independent woman with a man who made decisions about her life without consulting her. "Hyun-jae, I mean," he said more carefully, "that I want you to stay, and I want to tell you why before you make a decision, and then the decision is entirely yours." He stood from the desk, which brought him to his full height in a way that she had noticed he didn't usually use deliberately. He was a man who managed the space he occupied carefully, always giving others room. "Marcus Webb is using my name to pressure you because he's correctly identified that you care about your child's future more than you care about any discomfort he can cause you personally. He's using me as a weapon against you. I take some exception to that." "Some exception," she said. "Considerable exception," he amended. "I would like to speak to his lawyer. Not as a threat, as a clarification. He has built a motion on an association between my name and criminal enterprise. Associations are not the same as convictions, and convictions are not the same as current conduct, and current conduct in this house, over the last 14 days, has consisted of providing a pregnant woman with a safe place to sleep and eat, and plan her next steps without being harassed into a bad decision by a man who should have been protecting her in the first place. His jaw tightened, just fractionally, the first time she'd seen anything close to visible anger from him. I want to make very certain his lawyer understands the difference between what my name implies and what it proves, and what the consequences are of continuing to use it as a legal instrument against a woman I have chosen to help. Naomi looked at him for a long moment. You're going to make this go away. I'm going to make the motion difficult to sustain, he said. There's a difference. Your lawyer does the legal work. I simply make certain that the people on the other side understand that the cost-benefit analysis of continuing this particular approach has shifted significantly. Hyun-jae. She said his name with the specific weight of someone who had something important to say and was deciding how to say it. I need you to do this, whatever it is you're going to do, in a way that doesn't come back on my daughter, on her record, her name, her future. Whatever you are, whatever they can say about you, I need her untouched by it. He looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen from him before, not softness exactly, but something beneath the usual controlled surface that was considerably more human than what he usually permitted. She will be untouched by it, he said. I promise you that. Whatever I am careful about what I attach my name to. I would not attach hers. Hey, before we get to the end of this, subscribe if you haven't and drop a comment with what you think should happen between these two. I read every single one. Now, back to the story. The motion was withdrawn 6 days later, in circumstances that Naomi's lawyer described, with evident professional satisfaction, as Prescott having reassessed the evidentiary foundation and determined the filing was premature. Naomi understood this to mean that someone had had a conversation with Prescott that had materially altered his client's enthusiasm for the approach, and she chose not to ask for the specific details. Marcus's second attempt was more direct. He appeared at Hyun-jae's building himself, on a Thursday afternoon, unannounced, with the specific energy of a man who had run out of proxies and decided that his own presence was the tool he'd been underutilizing. She met him in the lobby, not upstairs. This was deliberate. She had learned over 3 years that Marcus performed better with an audience, and a lobby with a concierge and security cameras was an audience that also produced a record. You look well, he said with the particular tone of a man who found this irritating. I am well, she said. This... He gestured vaguely at the lobby, at the building, at everything it represented. Isn't what I expected for you. I know. You expected me to be struggling. I'm sorry to disappoint you. His jaw tightened. I want to talk about the baby. My lawyer? I don't want to talk to your lawyer. I want to talk to you. He leaned slightly forward, dropping his voice into the register he used when he wanted to seem like he was being intimate and honest. I made a mistake, Naomi. That night, I was overwhelmed and I handled it badly, and I know that. But she's my daughter, too. I deserve a chance to be part of her life. Naomi looked at her husband, at the man she had spent 3 years making herself smaller for, at the man who had put her outside in February rain and then sent proxies and legal motions when the consequences of that choice turned out to be more inconvenient than he'd anticipated, and felt with complete clarity the specific absence of whatever had once made her believe the better version of him was in there somewhere. You can be part of her life, she said, on a schedule through appropriate legal channels, with the support structures that the court determines are in her best interest. That's what you get, Marcus. Not because I'm punishing you, because that's what you built, starting at 11 o'clock on a February night, and I'm not going to pretend you built something different. He stared at her for a long moment with the expression of a man who had expected negotiation and received a verdict instead. Then he left, and the lobby was quiet, and Naomi stood in it for a moment with her hand on her stomach and the particular steadiness of someone who has just closed a door they should have closed a long time ago. She told Hyun-jae about it that evening in the kitchen, in the hour they had somehow developed as theirs without planning it. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things about him she had come to value most, his absolute willingness to give the full weight of his attention to what she was saying without organizing his response while she was still talking. How do you feel? He asked when she finished. Clear, she said. Sad, in the way you're sad when something is definitely over and you're also definitely glad it's over, but mostly clear. He nodded. Then, with the careful precision of a man who had been building towards something for 20 days and was finally deciding to say it, I want to tell you something, and I want you to feel entirely free to tell me it's too soon or too complicated or simply not something you want, and I will hear that, and it will not change anything about this house or your place in it. She looked at him with full attention. Say it. I would like, when you're ready, When everything that needs to settle has settled. To be someone you choose to know, he said. Not out of circumstance. Not because you're here and I'm here and the situation created proximity, but deliberately. As a choice. He met her eyes with the directness she had trusted since the first night. You are one of the most capable people I have encountered in a very long time, and you are going to build something extraordinary for yourself and your daughter, and I would very much like to be allowed to watch that happen, if you'll let me. Naomi was quiet for a moment, not the quiet of uncertainty, but the quiet of someone who has been carrying something they've been afraid to put down, and is finally setting it on the table. I have a daughter coming in 3 months, she said. My life is about to become very full of things that have nothing to do with what's happening between you and me right now. I know. And you, what you do, what you are, I don't fully understand it, and I'm going to need to before anything becomes anything. I know that too, he said. I'm not asking you for anything tonight. I'm asking for the permission to still be here when things have settled enough for you to decide. She looked at him for a long moment, at the man who had stopped his car in February rain for a stranger, who had given her a room and a name for her daughter, and a promise that her child would be untouched by the weight of his world, who had made the word enough mean something real when it had been a long time since she'd trusted anyone else's version of it. You're already here, she said softly. You've been here. I think we both know that. Something shifted in his expression. Not the controlled surface shift she'd learned to read, but something underneath it. Something that had apparently been waiting quite patiently for exactly those words. Zora, he said after a moment. Zora, she agreed. Zora Carter was born 7 weeks later, in the spring, weighing 8 pounds and arriving with the specific, furious energy of someone who had been waiting a long time to have opinions about the world and intended to share them immediately. Naomi held her in the hospital room, with her mother on one side and her best friend on the other, and thought, as she had thought throughout the last 7 weeks with increasing frequency and decreasing self-consciousness, about the specific chain of events that had led from a February front step to this room. The rain, the car, the card on the step, the kitchen at 11 o'clock, the name decided over tea. Hyun-jae was in the waiting room. He had been in the waiting room for 4 hours, which she knew because her mother had reported back on the situation with the specific expression of a woman who had several opinions and was, for once, choosing to keep most of them to herself. He's been out there the whole time, her mother said, just sitting. He brought flowers and then put them down because he wasn't sure if it was presumptuous. Naomi looked at her daughter and thought about a man who had the power to make entire legal motions disappear and had put down a bunch of flowers because he wasn't sure if it was presumptuous, and felt something that she was done trying to be cautious about. Send him in, she said. He came in carefully, the way he did everything, giving the room and everyone in it the full courtesy of his attention. He looked at Naomi and then at the small, already opinionated person in her arms, and for the first time in 7 weeks of knowing him, Naomi watched the controlled surface of Seo Hyun-jae drop completely. Zora, he said quietly. Zora, Naomi confirmed. He sat in the chair beside the bed, the chair her mother vacated with the particular efficiency of a woman who had made a decision about a situation, and looked at the two of them with an expression that Naomi would describe to her daughter, many years later, as the look of a man understanding for the first time what he'd been building toward. It was not a clean beginning. Her divorce was not yet final. His world was not simpler than it had been in February. There were things between them that would need to be understood properly, in time, with honesty on both sides. She had known, since the night he told her what she reminded him of, that there was grief in him that hadn't fully been named yet, and grief required its own time and its own honesty. But Zora was here, and spring was outside the window, and the man sitting beside her had stopped his car in February rain for a stranger with a hospital bag and a name on a mailbox, and she had bitten exactly no one, and something that had started in the worst moment of her recent life had become, quietly and without permission, something she was no longer willing to imagine not having. Some things didn't need to be clean to be real. Some things just needed to be chosen again and again by people willing to keep showing up regardless of what it cost them. Hyun-jae was still there. Naomi was still choosing, and Zora, entirely unbothered by the complexity of the situation she'd been born into, had fallen asleep in her mother's arms with the absolute confidence of someone who already knew exactly where she was supposed to be. If this story moved you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't yet. We have more stories like this coming every week, and you do not want to miss what's next. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.